Chullin Daf Samach Zayin. Yesterday we learned an amazing halacha that aquatic creatures that originated in water that's in a vessel or in a pit that's in the ground, you're allowed to eat them, 100% kosher, but the same aquatic creatures that originate in the ocean or in flowing water, it's usher to eat them. And the Gemara learned this out from two psukim that are in the parsha of the kashrus of fish. The combination of the two psukim, we learn a klal upratu klal, that only creatures that don't have fins and scales in the ocean and in flowing waters, it's usher to eat, whereas creatures that don't have fins and scales that originated in waters other than oceans and flowing water, mutter to eat. And the fact that the first pasuk has the word toichlu, which tells us not only water that's in a vessel, but also water that's in a pit is also mutter to eat. The very Shmuel come to the same conclusion, but rather than learning it from a klal, pratu klal, they learn it out from a ribui, miut, ribui. What's the difference? The difference is a klal and a prat. The prat limits the klal. In other words, if the Torah says fish in water, all waters, then the Torah says, well, wait a minute, I'm limiting it to the ocean. So it has to be only water from the ocean, and then comes another klal and adds one other thing or whatever. But when you have a ribui miut, the miut doesn't come to explain the ribui. The ribui says all waters. The miut just says, I'm taking out one type of water that's not included. It doesn't come to explain the ribui. So therefore, say the Rabbi Shmuel that all waters are included. What we take out is that mayon, a neveya, water that comes out of the ground, that's usher to eat fish that don't have fins and scales that originate in the water. But all other waters, such as a bar, would be mutar. And water that originated, a fish that originated in water that was in a kli, that you don't even need a pasuk for. It's very simple. Now, not only worms and shrotzim that originated in water that's in a vessel is mutter to drink, but also worms that are part of beer. Somebody made beer out of dates, and it's full of worms. And we're talking about worms that were there for more than 12 months. As the Gemara said earlier, that worms can't live more than 12 months. So you have beer that fermented for 12 months, and you have it, and all of a sudden you have worms. So you know that these worms are part of the beer. They didn't come in from outside. You're allowed to eat those worms. Says the Gemara, if one were to filter the beer, he should not do so at night, because perhaps the worm will latch onto the filter, and he'll be part of sheretz hasheretz ala aretz, meaning since he walked on the ground and he's not part of the beer, so for that second he became sheretz ala aretz, and that makes him completely usher, and you wouldn't see it because it's the night. And then he goes back into the beer, now he's usher and you don't know about it. What about a worm that crawls up the wall of the beer barrel or a glass of beer? That worm is mutter. Why? Because the walls surrounding the beer are part of his house. That's where he lives, that's where he dwells. The same thing would be by a mikvah. If you have a worm in water and he comes up the mikvah wall or the kli wall and then goes back down in, mutter to eat him. Says the Gemara. And by the way, the Gemara is much from the Gemara that in a mikvah you bend down and drink the worm from the water directly. Meaning, if you were to take a cup and put the water into a cup and there's a worm in that cup, it would be usher to drink. Why? Because that cup is not his dwelling place. Mashengin in beer, a cup from a barrel would be l'chayra, his dwelling place. What if you have a cucumber that's wormy? So it depends. If the cucumber is attached to the ground, then it's part of the ground, that worm is usher. But if the worm originated in the cucumber while it's detached from the ground, then it's mutter to eat the cucumber. Now the Gemara has a few questions and remains in teku. What about a worm that died as soon as it hit the ground? And what if you say that that kind of worm is usher? What if only half of it hit the ground? What if you caught it in mid-ear and ate it? Is it considered leaving the cucumber, or it never hit the ground and mamela it's mutter? What if the worm came up on top of the pre? What if it went on top of the pit of the date? Questions like that, the Gemara remains with a take. What if it went from one date to another date? It never saw the light of day, but it left its house and went to house B. It went from date 1 to date 2. Teku. What about worms that are parasites within an animal? They latch onto his lung, into his liver. Are you allowed to eat those worms? They originate within an animal. Says the Gemara, they're usher. Why? Because they originated outside of the animal. There are two ways a worm can get into the body of an animal, either through his mouth, his nose, or from his waist. Says the Gemara, it didn't come from the waistline because then you would see worms throughout his intestines. So it had to be that when the animal fell asleep, a worm crawled into his nose, went into his lungs, from there to his liver, and memela, the worm is asur. Worms that are between the skin of an animal and his meat, says the Gemara, they're asur because they were asur while the animal was alive as Aver min achai, and the shchita is not matter those worms. As we're going to see in the next parak, that a vlad, a ubar, a baby within inside a mother is mutter through shchita, but that shchita is not matter worms. However, worms that are between the skin and the meat of a fish is mutter because fish don't have an isser Aver min achai. So those worms they originated, they were created in a situation of heter, and memela, those worms are mutter. The pasuk says, "Kol hoylech al gachain." Says the Gemara, that's referring, gachain is referring to a snake that slithers, and we learn from there also, kol refers to an earthworm, anything similar to earthworm. Al arba is referring to a scorpion, even though he has 8 legs, but his main legs, his 4 main legs, are 4. Kol hoylech comes to include a beetle, and anything that's similar to a beetle. Marber raglayim, it's a Hebrew word for centipede. It's a centipede, anything with many legs, similar to that, is asur. Says the Gemara, and this is the final halacha, and the most amazing parak, Eli Trefus. I'm really going to miss Eli Trefus. The Leviathan, says the Gemara, is a fish that's completely kosher because the Gemara brings psukim, although the Yerushalmi is mechulik, but the Bavli holds that it's a kosher fish that has snapper v'kaskesed, that has fins and scales, and memela, Be'ezer Hashem, when Mashiach comes, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to feed the tzaddikim from the Leviathan with his hechsher and a kosher fish. Have a wonderful day. Sei gesund.